9 o'clock, and I said, blow some air through the line, let's see if we can clear. And then a line, and then boom, and suddenly, boom, I got a face full of gas. And then the pilot light jumped and my face caught on fire.
I have 45 years. The first 40, unbelievable. The last 5 have been challenging. When you have to feed someone and change them and you know, carry them to the bathroom and do all that kind of stuff every day, it's a challenge.
The original color, that's French blue, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, well, I think French blue, I guess it'd be the color. Yeah.
Jay Leno was never someone good at talking about feelings, but there was one person he never stopped loving. From the bright stage to the quiet home, he walked through glory, through loss, and then returned to where it all began, beside the woman who had been with him since the days of anonymity. A promise made in 1980, a love spanning half a century, and now, at 75, he has finally said what the world had been waiting to hear. The story behind that confession is about to be revealed. After closing 2 decades with The Tonight Show in 2014, Jay Leno left the studio and returned to where he began, the garage. No more audience, no more late night set, only the sound of engines, metal, and the familiar scent of oil. Since 2015, he has devoted his energy to Jay Leno's Garage, a program where he talks about another kind of love beyond the stage. Cars. The original color. That's French blue, isn't it? I think. Yeah, I think French blue, I guess. It'll be the color. Yeah. According to public records, his collection includes over 180 cars and 160 motorcycles, ranging from classic to modern. Among them are rare models like the 1910 white steam car, the 1999 Y2K jet bike, the 1966 Volga Gas 21, and the 2012 Tata Nano, each carrying a story, a fragment of memory from the road he has traveled. That same space also became the site of his first major trial. In November 2022, while working on an antique car, a small spark caught the gas tank and burst into flames. Jay suffered severe burns to his face and hands and was rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment.
Ran a clog, and I said, blow some air through the line. Let's see if we can clear. And then suddenly, boom, I got a face full of gas. And then the pilot light jumped and my face caught on fire. Before he could fully recover, in January 2023, he had a motorcycle accident that broke his ribs, kneecaps, and collarbone. Doctors said that if his speed had been just slightly higher, the outcome could have been far worse. In November 2024, another fall caused a wrist fracture and facial injuries. 3 accidents in 2 consecutive years. For a man who had lived under the spotlight, that string of misfortunes marked the end of any illusion of invincibility. But he was not the only one in need of care. During that same period, Mavis Leno, the wife who had been by his side for nearly half a century, began to show clear cognitive decline. Doctors diagnosed her with progressive dementia, requiring a legal guardian to oversee her finances and medical decisions. In early 2024, Jay filed a petition with the Los Angeles court to obtain guardianship over their shared estate. In April, the court approved, granting him full management rights. The decision was more than a legal formality. It marked a turning point when love became a matter of survival and responsibility turned into the only language of devotion. In an interview months later, Jay simply said, "I like taking care of her." That sentence contained everything: duty, compassion, and loneliness.
You know, I enjoy the time with my wife. I go home, I cook dinner for her, watch TV, and it's okay. It's okay. It's basically what we did before, except now I have to feed her and do all those things. But I like it. I like taking care of her. From the days of hospitals and legal paperwork, the words he spoke in 2025 closed a lifetime of keeping promises. A confession the public could not ignore. The road where I have to go this, I always took her with me when I could. And we always had a good time. We always had fun. It's like we're on a date all the time. A lifelong confession. At the beginning of 2025, during a live conversation, Jay Leno spoke slowly. She was the love of my life. 49 years together. Nearly half a century spent with the only woman he ever called my life. Now distilled into 7 words. Mavis Leno is no longer lucid. Still, whenever she hears his voice or watches old recordings, she laughs, reacting as if memory briefly finds its way back. In another interview, Jay said, "She still got the fire." Since his wife's condition worsened, Jay's rhythm of life has changed completely. He has shortened his tours, turned down long-term engagements, and accepted only small shows to keep working. Each evening, he returns home on time, cooks, then watches old recordings with Mavis. Those memory rituals have become his way of keeping love alive. No longer romantic gestures, but habits that give her fading mind something to hold on to. He still retells old stories Mavis has heard hundreds of
of times, even knowing there will be no reply. Legally, the guardianship document approved by the Los Angeles court allows him to manage finances and medical decisions. It is a necessary right, but Jay does not see it as the heart of the matter. To him, the most important part lies in the memories, something no law can protect or assign to preserve. He once said in a behind-the-scenes interview, "Every morning, I just think about whether she'll smile today. If she does, that's enough." The house they live in now is described as quiet, rarely visited by outsiders. Close friends say Jay still wakes early. As always, eats breakfast, reads the paper, then walks with Mavis around the garden. She doesn't always know who he is, but he never stops talking to her. At 75, while many of his peers have stepped away from the public eye, Jay still appears. Not to talk about fame or cars, but to speak of Mavis. He once ended a television interview with the words, "I never thought I could be this lucky." It was no longer the line of a comedian, but of a husband who has lived through enough to understand the value of companionship. The man once seen as the face of America's laughter now chooses silence as the final language of his love. From that moment, everything circles back to the beginning. One night in Los Angeles in 1976, two strangers happened to walk into the same room where one of Hollywood's most enduring love stories began. The moment of destiny. In January 1976, at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles, Jay Leno was a young stand-up comedian performing in a late-night slot. Mavis Nicholson, the woman who would later become his wife, was there only to meet friends in the television production circle, with no intention beyond work. But that night, amid laughter and dim yellow lights, a brief conversation sparked a bond that will last nearly half a century. Jay once recalled that the moment he saw Mavis, his first thought was, "That's the person I'm going to be with." According to later interviews, Mavis says she wasn't looking for a relationship at all. Her life then was simple, focused on writing and freelancing. But that night at the Comedy Store changed everything. Right after his set, Jay struck up a conversation and invited her for coffee. They talked until late, and as Mavis later recounted, "We didn't plan anything. It just felt very natural." The connection formed so quickly that neither could explain it. It kept them together ever since. As the relationship deepened, Jay began to think about marriage in a very practical way. In a later interview, he recalled his proposal story. "I had this insurance policy. If we're married, we're covered." The reason sounded dry, but beneath it lay the protective instinct of a man who had learned to be cautious with every dollar he earned. He feared that if something happened to him, Mavis wouldn't have access to his insurance coverage. On November 30th, 1980, their wedding took place at a friend's home. He chose that date because it was the same day his parents had married, a small detail showing how he preserved family traditions. For years afterward, when asked why they had chosen such a modest ceremony, Jay would simply say, because what mattered was starting a life, not an event. The wedding lasted less than an hour, but it became the foundation of a marriage that would endure for over 40 years. Their story was also unique in another way. From the start, both agreed not to have children. In an interview with the Washington Post, Mavis said that since childhood, she had felt disconnected from the traditional image of women. Watching The Honeymooners, she realized that women were placed in positions where they always had to sacrifice. At 8 years old, she told her mother she would never marry or have kids. Later, Jay accepted that decision. He once shared on a talk show, "We didn't want to have kids, and that made life easier. We both had our own kind of freedom." By the late 1970s, Jay was touring across America. He spent most of his time on the road, while Mavis remained in Los Angeles, maintaining a steady routine. She never interfered with his work and rarely appeared at his shows. Their balance came naturally, one reaching into the spotlight, the other keeping the flame of everyday life. They were seldom seen together in public. Everyone in the industry understood that behind Jay's steadiness was always Mavis's quiet presence. As the spotlight began to turn toward Jay, they entered their first test. Life was often divided by tour schedules, and fame knocked constantly at their door. Instead of letting the spotlight consume them, they chose to step back, building a life that was quieter, steadier. Within that silence, the shape of a lasting home gradually came into view, the anchor amid the glare of fame. In the early 1980s, Jay Leno entered the busiest stage of his career. Tours followed one another, tapings filled his schedule, and he was rarely home for more than a few days at a time. The more the audience adored him, the heavier the pressure became to stay at his best. Meanwhile, Mavis Leno chose to remain outside the spotlight, taking the role of a quiet pillar behind the scenes. She handled expenses,
manage finances, and maintain a steady rhythm at home so Jay could focus entirely on his work. Their lives functioned like a tightly tuned machine. One moved at the pace of the stage, the other ensured life stayed on course. When Jay began appearing regularly on television, Mavis gradually found her own path. She had long been interested in women's rights, but it wasn't until the late 1990s that activism became her central focus. In 1997, Mavis was appointed chair of the Stop Gender Apartheid in Afghanistan campaign under the Feminist Majority Foundation. The organization worked to raise international awareness about the rights of Afghan women during the Taliban's tightening control. Under her leadership, the campaign expanded its reach, organizing lectures and large-scale fundraising events across the United States. Mavis's work was far removed from Jay's world. The two complemented each other. While Jay used humor to connect with the public, Mavis used social platforms to spread empathy. In 1999, they jointly donated $100,000 to the Feminist Majority Foundation. The contribution, publicly announced, funded education and healthcare programs, giving Afghan women opportunities to learn, work, and find protection. At a gathering that same year, the organization's director remarked, "They don't just donate, they show up, they listen, and they use their influence in the media to talk about what matters." Though they worked in different fields, Jay and Mavis remained aligned in their outlook on life. When asked about their decision not to have children, both gave the same response: "It's a choice, not a sacrifice." To them, marriage required no long-term plan or binding condition. Their bond endured through respect for each other's space. Mavis never saw herself as the wife of a famous comedian, and Jay never turned Mavis into an extension of his public image. By the mid-1990s, as Jay officially became the host of The Tonight Show, the spotlight began to shine directly on their private lives. Still, they maintained their quiet lifestyle. There were no lavish parties, no public displays of family life. The couple appeared together only at events of social value, especially fundraisers for women's rights and charity initiatives. Their life showed no dramatic twists. It was that very calmness that built the foundation for what came later. In a rare conversation about marriage, Jay once said, "If I weren't on stage, I'd be just a guy fixing cars in a garage, and she loved me even when I was still that guy." Mavis never confirmed or denied his words, but her way of living made it clear they were true. For nearly 2 decades, she sought no fame, relied on no title, dedicating herself to advocacy, reading, writing, and managing women's rights projects. It was during this time that they defined their way of existing between two worlds, the bright lights of television and the quiet of their Los Angeles home. But as fame reached its peak, the turbulence grew stronger. When Jay Leno stood at the top of television, the world began to scrutinize his every decision. Internal conflicts, airtime battles, and NBC's power struggles became national conversation. The storms behind height of glory. As the new millennium began, Jay Leno had become a familiar face to millions of Americans. He had hosted The Tonight Show since 1992, maintaining his position for over a decade and turning the program into an icon of late-night television. Every evening, more than 5 million viewers tuned in from their living rooms to watch him converse with politicians, singers, actors, and ordinary people alike. The Tonight Show with Jay Leno was more than entertainment. It was part of America's daily rhythm. At that point, Jay was no longer just a comedian. He was a cultural institution. But every peak comes with turbulence. In 2004, NBC made an internal agreement when Jay's contract ended in 2009. Conan O'Brien, his natural successor, would take over the show. Everything seemed fine until scheduling changes brought 2 generations of comedians into direct conflict. In June 2009, Conan officially took over The Tonight Show, while Jay was given a new program, The Jay Leno Show, airing at 10 p.m. 6 months later, ratings plunged. NBC decided to move Jay back to his original 11:35 slot, which meant pushing Conan's show to 12:05. Conan publicly refused, declaring, "I will not follow Jay at 12:05. The statement sent shockwaves through the industry, echoed by global media as a symbol of the American television crisis. For weeks, headlines across the country screamed about the Tonight Show war. Public opinion split into 2 camps, one supporting Conan, the other defending Jay. The internet flooded with criticism. Comedy forums became battlegrounds. In the middle of the storm, Jay never lashed out. He appeared on time, followed the same format, and started each show with his familiar smile. Years later, when asked about about that period, he simply said, "I have no regrets." A short sentence, but enough to reveal how he saw the entire ordeal. No justification, no blame, no denial. It was a response of someone long accustomed to scrutiny over every gesture and word. Throughout the controversy, Mavis Leno stayed completely out of the media. Her silence was not absence, but a choice. She understood that every word could be distorted and that what Jay needed most was a space untouched by public noise. She continued her work with the Feminist Majority Foundation, occasionally accompanying him behind the scenes before retreating once more from the spotlight. For them, peace came not from being defended, but from not needing to explain. By 2010, Jay officially returned to The Tonight Show. Debate continued, but he stayed quiet and focused on his craft. Ratings stabilized, and the show reclaimed its leading position in late-night television. In the years that followed, he maintained a relentless pace, 5 nights a week, no extended breaks, no pauses. It was a rhythm few in Hollywood could sustain. When asked why, he said, "Because I never saw it as a job. I just do what I do best." During this period, Jay rarely mentioned Mavis. Each time he did, his respect was clear. He said she was the only person whose advice he truly listened to. Though she was never part of the television world, Mavis quietly guided him, helping maintain balance between career and life. Their connection was subtle but evident. He brought laughter to millions. She kept calm in their shared world. In February 2014, Jay left The Tonight Show for the last time. The final broadcast ended with prolonged applause and a lineup of celebrities bidding him farewell. He thanked his audience, his colleagues, and closed more than 20 years of late-night history with the words, "When I started, I was a kid with a dream. Now I leave it to someone else's dream." A goodbye free of drama or sentiment, perfectly in tune with Jay, brief, direct, and gentle. When the lights dimmed, he stepped off stage with quiet composure. Behind the curtain, one person waited, Mavis. She had been the first to greet him after every show and the last to congratulate him when it all ended. For more than 20 years in the spotlight, Jay's anchor never changed. And when the lights went out, that foundation remained intact. The stage may have been dazzling, but it was Mavis's silence from a woman who never sought attention that sustained Jay through all those years. They had weathered every storm by living by a simple rule. Fame exists only in front of the camera. Real love lives behind closed doors. When the final applause faded, Jay Leno left the studio with his same familiar smile. And in their quiet Los Angeles home, Mavis was still there, the one person he needed to see after every show. If you believe love isn't about promises, but about someone keeping them for a lifetime, leave a like for this video. The story of Jay Leno and Mavis Leno is neither loud nor showy. It's powerful enough to leave the world in silence. Share this video so more people can see that, amidst fame and loss, there are still love stories that endure. And don't forget to subscribe, because the truest, simplest stories that touch the heart are waiting for you behind every clip.